I spent hours researching this, and I'm telling you right now, it made my skin crawl. Scams, exploitation, and networks that don't look like lone criminals. The Philippines has one of the most disturbing sides of the internet on the planet, and when you realize how it works, you start to feel like the internet isn't just watching you, it's feeding on you. Romance scams tend to be very common in many parts of the world, but what's going on in the Philippines with this topic is completely out of control. In fact, it's estimated that 63% of these scams worldwide are run directly out of Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Romance scams are carried out by people who create fake profiles, pretend to have a romantic relationship with any horny little sucker they find on the internet, manipulate them, and steal their money. So no, Cutie69, 5 miles from your house, is not a big booty goth girl who wants to meet you. In 2016, there was a case where a 54-year-old Australian businessman named David McLean met Lanny Manalo, a single woman looking for love, on a dating website. After months of romantic conversations and erotic photos, Lanny convinced McLean to send her money for some family emergencies she supposedly had. After 6 months and more than $35,000 paid out, McLean decided to travel to the Philippines to visit the love of his life, surprise her, and meet her in person, something that obviously never happened. The poor businessman realized that Lanny didn't exist and that he had been the victim of a local scam network, who had used multiple bank accounts and different types of transfer methods to receive the money, which made it extremely difficult for McLean to track the funds. He reported the case, but thanks to the incompetence of the Philippine authorities, he was never able to recover his money or make the guilty parties pay. They simply laughed at him, labeled him naive, and told him there wasn't much that could be done to recover the money he had spent. And just like David McLean, this has happened to many people, and not only men. In 2019, more than 20 American and European women were scammed by a group of Filipino fraudsters, led by a man named Aldrin McTanan. These men pretended to be U.S. soldiers, carrying out missions abroad. What they did was look for photos of handsome American soldiers, create fake profiles on different dating apps, and pretend to be single soldiers searching for love and tired of war. From that soap opera premise, they would start talking to different girls, telling them dramatic and romantic stories, something women love, and that's how they seduced them and earned their trust. And just like Lanny Manalo, these scammers spent months talking to their victims, building a romantic, sexual, and emotional relationship. The so-called soldiers claimed they were on secret missions overseas, which made it very difficult for them to manage their finances. So they started asking the women, desperate for love, for money, using excuses like emergencies, legal problems, and many other things. The heaviest case of these romance scams was a girl who said she had sent more than $100,000 to her supposed soldier boyfriend over a 2-year period. Over time, several women realized it was a scam and began reporting the case. Philippine authorities, together with the FBI and Interpol, worked to find the scammers. In the end, in an operation carried out in July 2019, the police arrested Aldrin McTanan and several people who worked with him. They seized computers and phones containing information about their operations and the victims they had scammed. And well, obviously the women who were scammed were never able to recover the money they had spent on the supposed soldiers. There was also another interesting case. Jane Ferrer, a Filipino woman, scammed more than $60,000 from Michael Bateson, a 63-year-old British man. Michael and Jane started talking on Facebook in mid-2017, and it wasn't difficult for her to gain his trust. Michael was a retired and single man with little company. Over the course of a year, Jane made sure to make him fall in love with her, treating him well and sending him all kinds of photos. She constantly asked him for money, claiming that her mother was sick and that as her partner, he had to support her. So during that time, Michael practically took care of supporting her. He sent her a total of $60,000 over the span of a year. That is about $5,000 monthly. Keep in mind that the average salary in the Philippines is $400 a month. Jane was getting from Michael more than 10 times what a normal person in the Philippines earns. Absolutely insane. And well, like in most of these cases, when Michael traveled to the Philippines to meet the love of his life, Jane completely disappeared. And even though he reported the case to the country's authorities, the poor and lonely Michael never managed to recover his money, let alone his dignity. And like that one, there are many similar cases. Lonely people looking for love on the internet, who end up sending money to some Filipino guy who's playing with their feelings more than your ex ever played with you. Online crusaders are a group of people who dedicate themselves to ruining the lives of all kinds of degenerates and online criminals. They're like internet monitors, so not everything you find on the disturbing Filipino internet is purely bad. These groups were born as a response to the total impunity that most online crimes have, especially those related to child exploitation, fraud, and sexual crimes. They take justice into their own hands by exposing and doxing criminals on social media, forums, or even turning them over to the authorities. And like everything in life, there are many people who support them, but there's also a large number of people who criticize them, mainly for putting innocent lives at risk, skipping legal processes, and creating a culture of mob justice that can spiral out of control. I don't understand how doxing criminals puts innocent people at risk when it's done 100% correctly and with evidence. But hey, there are all kinds of weird moralists on the internet who think they're always right. I mean, it's better to do this than to do nothing. Even though they might have a point, it also has to be said, bad doxing can have disastrous consequences when there isn't enough proof. When names and addresses of supposed criminals are exposed, you have to be very sure they're guilty, because you're not only putting them at risk, but also their families, who might have absolutely nothing to do with their crimes. For example, in 2017, a group of crusaders in the Philippines, acting under the premise of protecting children, began investigating alleged pedophiles on social media. In one of those cases, they came across Ray, a 34-year-old man who was using an online account to interact with people, including teenagers. This group accused him of being a sexual predator, claiming that his online activity was suspicious. They gathered Ray's personal information, including his full name and address, and posted it on the several social platforms. In the posts, they labeled him as a mild abuser. The post went viral, and within hours his address was exposed, and a crowd of people went to his house to literally kill him. Obviously, the situation spiraled out of control, and even the neighbors began demanding justice. The group of people managed to force their way into his home, breaking windows and completely destroying the inside, not caring that his wife and small children were inside. Ray and his family tried to escape by locking themselves in a back room, while around 30 people destroyed his entire house. In the end, they managed to call the police to clear the house. After all of this, the authorities investigated the case and discovered that Ray had no criminal record and that the accusations were false. It was revealed that he had simply been interacting online in a way that, while inappropriate to some, was not a crime. And even though I don't know what they mean by interacting online in an inappropriate way, apparently Ray really was innocent. Something similar happened to Gabriel Santos, a 22-year-old young man from the city of Cebu. This guy was singled out by a group of crusaders who accused him of being part of a child exploitation network. It all started when Gabriel was seen interacting in several internet forums that were well known for being used to share illegal content, mostly related to CP and that kind of dark stuff. Even though his interactions were actually innocent, the simple fact that he was in that part of the internet was suspicious enough for the group of crusaders who found him. So they started collecting Gabriel's personal information, his full name, home address, details about his family, among other things. This information was posted on several accounts with a lot of reach, along with accusations linking him to trafficking and the abuse of minors. And as usually happens in these cases, it only took a few hours for all of his information to be shared by thousands of Filipino users seeking so-called justice. And just like what happened with Ray, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. People organized and mobilized to surround his house, demanding that Gabriel come out and face the consequences of his supposed perverted acts. To prevent him from being killed, the authorities had to intervene and arrest Gabriel, not because they had proof of his guilt, but to protect him from the crowd, which believed he was a sadist just because some Twitter accounts said so. After his arrest, the authorities began investigating the accusations, tracked his online activity, and discovered that Gabriel had no direct connection to trafficking illegal content. What had happened was that he was part of several forums where there were, in fact, users with criminal intentions, but he had not shared inappropriate content or taken part in suspicious conversations. He was simply a curious young internet user who, like all of us, browsed online communities without knowing the full extent of the risks associated with some of them. There are fears that don't scream. They just sit there, silent, like a shadow stuck to your skin. For a mother, one of those fears looks like a door closing and footsteps fading away. Your daughter heading out for a bit, and promising she'll be back. In Christine Silawan's case, that promise turned into a nightmare, and the most disturbing part isn't only the violence at the end, it's the invisible path that led her there, because before the field and the blood, there was a screen. On the morning of March 11th, in Sitilo Mayelege, a villager was walking across a stretch of empty, desolate land. In the distance, he spotted something lying still. He moved closer, and what he found knocked the air right out of him. It was the body of a young girl, lifeless, with no clothing from the waist down. Her face had been brutally disfigured, with her skull and eyes exposed. The field had looked peaceful, but now it was a horror scene. The villager called others over. Within minutes, a crowd formed. When police arrived, they tried to clear the area and covered the body with newspapers and a white cloth, but the rumor had already taken hold. The night before, a teenage girl had gone missing, and the place where the body was found was chillingly close to a familiar home. Police went straight to the house of Lourdes, Christine's mother. Lourdes got to the scene with her soul hanging by a thread, and the moment she saw the body, she broke. Even with the disfigurement, she knew. A mother recognizes what can't even be recognized. It was her daughter. In that instant, Christine Silawan stopped being a missing person. She became a victim. Christine was 16 years old and a 9th grade student at Maribago National High School. Her friends described her as kind and trustworthy. She had a structured routine. She'd let people know when she was leaving, and she'd always come back on time. She was a devoted Catholic, attended Mass, and served as a lector. She dreamed of becoming a flight attendant. Nothing in her life seemed like it was leading to a tragedy. On the afternoon of March 10th, Christine got ready to go to church like she always did. Lourdes asked her to come straight home afterward. Christine agreed like it was the most normal thing in the world. Lourdes expected her back around 7 that evening, but the hours passed and Christine didn't return. Worry started growing like something alive, tightening around Lourdes' chest. Lourdes went to the church and asked about her daughter. A friend, Ryan, explained that Christine had stepped out to buy food from a nearby vendor, and they got separated when he went into the bathroom. When he came back, Christine was gone. The vendor didn't notice anything strange. There were no screams, just a sudden emptiness, as if someone had simply switched her off from the world. Lourdes searched on her own and eventually reported her daughter missing to the police. National outrage erupted when Christine's body was found. A 2 million peso reward, approximately $35,000, was offered, and a special team was formed. The autopsy was quick and brutal. Christine died around 7 p.m. on March 10th. She had been stabbed 27 times. Several wounds were on her arms, like defensive injuries. There was blood in her genital area, suggesting sexual abuse. And the mutilation of her face and neck was so extreme, it looked like it had been done to erase who she was. Some people suggested wild animals might have caused part of the damage, but that explanation felt weak. The pattern was too specific. The face and the neck, as if someone had wanted it to be impossible to recognize her as a teenage girl. Police needed a suspect, and the first name that came up was Jonas Martel Bueno, a local man with a history of murder and disfigurement. But after investigating, Jonas was released. He wasn't responsible. And once again, the case was left faceless, open, raw, and unresolved. Then came the clue that changed everything: security camera footage. In the recording, Christine was seen walking beside a man the night she was believed to have died. The camera only captured their backs, hiding his identity. But there was something even more terrifying than not seeing his face. Christine didn't seem to be forced. She walked calmly. That video hinted at an unsettling truth. The person beside her might have been someone she trusted, and that's where the internet becomes the real crime scene. Police reviewed Christine's messages and found 2 key threads. One with an account named C.J. Diaz, a supposed new love interest, and another with John, her ex-boyfriend. The investigation started turning toward John with a simple theory: jealousy, revenge, a hurt teenager. Public opinion turned on him fast. His family protested, brought up witnesses, raised doubts. The defense insisted it was all circumstantial, but in cases like this, rumors carry more weight than logic. Just when the country seemed to have picked its monster, another man appeared: Renato Payupan Lainez. He was 43, had 5 children, and was arrested for illegally possessing a firearm. While in custody, he confessed to the murder. Police presented him to the media, and Renato said he was the one who killed Christine. And what came next was worse. He claimed he was C.J. Diaz. In an instant, the case filled up with modern poison. C.J. Diaz wasn't a boy. It was a digital mask. Renato admitted he used that account to pretend he was 16 and lure teenage girls. Christine was one of them. They had chatted on Messenger long enough for the lie to feel familiar. That's the trap. Repetition creates trust, even when the person behind the screen is a stranger. Renato said he decided to wait for her near the church. According to his version, Christine was shocked when she realized CJ was a grown man and tried to leave, but he insisted on walking her home. And that's when the footage becomes a quiet whisper of terror. It wasn't a casual walk, it was the final stretch of a trap that had already snapped shut inside a chat. Renato claimed he asked Christine to have sex with him, and she refused, saying she would call John to pick her up. That rejection supposedly triggered him. He said he dragged her into the field, stabbed her with scissors, and disfigured her face. Then he explained he confessed out of pity, so John wouldn't keep taking the blame. But the confession didn't erase the doubts. Side-by-side comparisons of the footage showed differences in the man's appearance. Forensic analysis suggested acid might have been involved, not just scissors. The autopsy pointed to sexual abuse, but Renato denied it. And the impossible question remained: if the field was close to houses, and it wasn't that late, how did no one hear anything? Not long after, Renato took it back and pleaded not guilty. And before the truth could be fully sorted out, he was found dead in his cell. Reports mentioned threats, depression, and suicide. With Renato gone, police declared the case closed. For Lords, that closure was another blow. It wasn't justice. It was silence. And that's exactly why this case still feels so unsettling. Because the main weapon wasn't scissors or a knife. It was a fake identity. The internet allowed a grown man to slip into a teenager's world without knocking on a single door, without raising suspicion in the streets, without anyone seeing him lurking nearby. In a chat, age is something you type, a face is something you choose, trust is something you manufacture, through constant messages, sweet questions, and the illusion that the person on the other side is from your same world. That's why the walking footage is so twisted. It looks normal because the kidnapping had already happened earlier, on the screen. Christine wasn't being dragged in that moment. She was following a story that had started on Messenger. And when something goes wrong online, there are no screams to warn a neighbor. There's only a scene, a sudden silence, a last message that never gets answered. The rush to close the case also left a bitter taste. First John, the ex, turned into the prime suspect because it fit a neat narrative and the pressure was massive. Then Renato, the confession, the retraction, the death in custody. Too many quick endings for a crime that was way too dark. And while the town slept, that screen kept glowing. A fake profile, a made-up story, and a teenage girl believing she was talking to someone real, not a predator. Christine Silawan became a symbol of a modern kind of terror, a crime that started with an internet connection. It didn't begin with a visible attack. It began with a fake profile and an invented name, with a grown man pretending to be a teenager, slipping closer without setting off alarms. And that's the most disturbing part. The monster doesn't always come running out of the dark. Sometimes it shows up typing, with the perfect lie. In the end, the case leaves behind a warning that sounds worse the more real it feels. Danger isn't always outside. Sometimes it comes in through a notification. Sometimes it lives inside a chat, smiling behind a fake name, waiting for someone to trust just enough to take that final step. The Philippines has become a paradise for degenerates, because in this place the laws are practically non-existent when it comes to mild sexual exploitation material. And if you're not familiar with the term, it's common for predators to use coded abbreviations and harmless-looking phrases to search for this kind of illegal content online without getting banned from platforms. Back to the point, it's not just now that laws against this content in the Philippines are almost non-existent. Historically, legislation against this type of material has been pretty weak, and in most cases poorly enforced. And it's not that there are no laws against it, because there's the Children's Protection Act against exploitation, abuse, and discrimination, and laws that specifically criminalize child abuse material. The problem is that there are tons of loopholes and not enough resources to enforce them properly. On top of that, corruption and the lack of training within the Philippine police allow many degenerates to get away with it in these cases. And even though the Philippine government has tried to do something, the reality is that the huge demand for this content and the country's poverty create the perfect environment for perverts to keep abusing minors and selling that abuse for huge amounts of money. Something like what happened with the infamous video known as Daisy's Destruction, which was reportedly being sold for more than $10,000 per fragment, showing horrific abuse of a baby nicknamed Daisy. The creator was named Peter Scully, and he became notorious for crimes tied to child exploitation in the Philippines. He also founded what was considered one of the largest and most profitable child abuse content production operations in history, called No Limits Fun. Thankfully, this man was arrested in 2015 and sentenced to 129 years in prison at the Cagayan de Oro provincial jail. The worst part is that this man isn't even Filipino. He was born in Melbourne, Australia, and he was welcomed in the Philippines with open arms after being accused of sexual crimes and having stolen more than $2 million through a digital scam. Scully knew the Philippines was the perfect place for him, because he had already made some contacts in the country after creating a website that connected Filipino prostitutes of all ages with wealthy people in Australia. And when I say all ages, I mean all ages. This guy was obsessed with the business of child sexual exploitation. When he arrived in the Philippines, thanks to a few connections within that underground world, he met a 14-year-old prostitute named Carmen Ann Alvarez, whom he made his girlfriend and accomplice in the horrifying acts he committed in the country. With Carmen's help, Scully offered money to minors and their families in exchange for participating in his recordings. Specifically with little Daisy, who was actually named Barbie, Peter convinced her mother to hand her over, telling her that he was a billionaire Australian philanthropist who liked changing the lives of underprivileged young people by giving them education, a home, and food. On top of offering them a huge amount of money, he literally bought a mother's daughter. It's estimated that Peter produced at least 10 hours of morbid content, although the specific number of videos and photos has never been confirmed. As you'd expect, he sold it on the deep web, and his clients were from all over the world. He simply used the internet and the lack of laws in the Philippines to create one of the greatest atrocities ever known in the history of the internet. And he wasn't alone. Peter worked with a pretty large group of people, including Filipino police officers and agents. That's why the Filipino internet can be so disturbing. The fact that the police are part of a multi-million-dollar industry of CP content is something unexplainable. And to be fair, those of us in the US have seen some pretty dark things involving the police, but this is on another level. There's another similar case that's just as bizarre as Peter Scully's, the case of David Timothy Deacon. In 2017, the country's authorities and the FBI raided his residence in Mabalacat, Philippines, where they uncovered a global network of live-streamed child abuse, where thousands of sick people pay to watch and direct news in real time. So Deacon wasn't just recording the abuse, he also allowed pedophiles around the world to pay in order to direct these acts as they happen. When Philippine authorities stormed Deacon's home, they found 2 underage girls who had been subjected to all kinds of horrific acts. In addition, they recovered a massive amount of evidence: hard drives, cameras, toys, and children's underwear, as well as detailed scripts Deacon used to run the streams and videos. And just like what happened with little Daisy and Peter Scully, one of the most unsettling elements of Deacon's modus operandi was the exploitation of extreme poverty in the region, where desperate families sold their children or collaborated in the production of this type of content just for money. And once again, thank the universe, or whatever it is that controls our world, Deacon was convicted on multiple charges of child abuse and human trafficking. And like these, there are surely thousands of cases living on the Filipino internet that will never be discovered. This is one of the reasons why the Filipino internet is one of the most disturbing in the entire world. Guys, thanks for watching this video and supporting the channel, especially you for watching it all the way through and not getting stressed out by my out-of-pocket comments. Subscribe, leave a like, and comment literally anything so I can reply to you. I'll just drop a few videos that I'm sure you'll be interested in, and I'll see you in the next one.